Yeah. Reverting to Islam is one thing, preaching another. Why preach?
I don't know if I ever characterize myself as a preacher. I think it's other people. They see people who represent religion and speak about their religious values as preachers. I'm not a preacher. I'm a teacher. That's a big difference.
So we should call you a teacher in Islam?
Well, no, not necessarily.
Help us out here.
Yeah,
I want to know.
No. I happen to be a Muslim. So the moral values, you see, the moral values that drive my views are Islam. But I'm not a person preaching about Islam, calling people to Islam. That's not my ambition. Maybe 20 years ago, in a bit of my naivete, you could say that because maybe people think we need to call people to Islam. But 20 years after understanding human psychology, I don't call people to Islam. I try to wear the principles of Islam through my conduct. I try to engage with people. And then if people are inquisitive like yourself and they say, "But you're a Muslim, what is that about?" Then from that point, because you knock on the door, then I answer.
Why do you consider that as being important to you, and maybe to Islam?
If I were the manager of an art gallery, wouldn't I feel the necessity of taking people through and looking at the art and explaining what it is? Of course I would, because I would consider it to be a valuable job. So as a Muslim, there are 1.5 or more million Muslims in the world. Islam has occupied a huge amount of the history of the world and its civilizations. So therefore, being a Muslim, I feel very empowered, I feel very privileged. And so it is a part of my life that when people inquire about it, I have to have the answers, and I do.
We looked up at some sensational and hostile reports about you we could find on the internet. And for once and for all, could you respond by saying if it's true or false? Yeah, so we finally know.
Do I have to say true or false, or can I just answer?
True or false, and then you can tell me more about that. You claim that AIDS was invented at a US governmental lab.
Well, Abdullah, I think that if any one of us was to just exercise a bit of our research capabilities over the internet or otherwise, or go to a public library, you'll find out that the conspiracies and the background on AIDS is very diversified. There's a lot of information out there.
And one of them is that it was created by a governmental lab in the US.
No, not just one of them, but there is a very principal amount of forensic information that leads to Fort Detrick, that the World Health Organization, the Center of Disease Control, and the names like Mr. Robert Gallo and the Detrick Memorandum.
So it's true?
Well, we're not going to say it's true. We'll just say that when there's forensic evidence, when there is very clear indications that it is something other than a normal virus, okay, so then if it is a man-made virus, as most forensic evidence seems to point out, then if it's a man-made virus, it had to be incubated and developed somewhere. It had to be launched based upon some kind of a schedule. So now, that's not my theory.
But you believe in the evidence?
No. It is evidence that I have to consider. And when people ask, we have to consider both sides of the coin. Because if people were to just treat it like it's some kind of a medical phenomena, then I think that's only one side of the coin. But if we look on the other side of the coin, then we may be able to see something a little bit different.
So you're still thinking about it? Still looking up?
Well, I'm still researching, but I have my own subjective feelings about it.
Good. Second one. You say the Quran permits wife beating. I
never said that.
So it's false?
Of course it's false. The Quran doesn't say anything about wife beating. Out of the 6,626 verses of the Quran that I've read repeatedly, I don't see anything there about wife beating. The Quran mentions a phrase in Arabic, يَضْرِبُهُنَّ, and you're an Arab, so I think, يَضْرِبُهُنَّ. Now this terminology can mean a number of things in language. For instance, God says, ضَرَبَ لَهُمْ. The Quran speaks, God says, ضَرَبَ لَهُمْ. He doesn't mean beat them, he says, and strike for them a parable. See, so make a parable for them, point out something for them. put a proposition for them. So
there are people who translated it as being leave them.
Yeah, exactly.
Like a cooling down moment.
That's correct. So there are a number of ways to approach that terminology, but I think the best approach is the approach of our Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessing upon him, because as a father, as a husband, he's our ideal. He never beat a wife. He never beat an animal. So he says that the best of you is he who is best to his family, and I'm the best among you. So if our Prophet interpreted that verse from God, and he didn't beat a wife, and those that followed him in piety, the khulafa, they didn't beat their wives.
There are still certain Muslims, a minority, which think that they are allowed to beat their wives from Islam. So you're basically telling them now that they are wrong.
We have to say, Abdullah, that Islam has been taken hostage by people's culture, just like Christianity, and we need to separate culture from the religion and its sources. But for Khalid Yasin, just to make it clear, never said that. That is something that somebody took out of context using,
so that's false.
Using sound bites.
We're going to leave it now.
Yes.
Last statement. You say that Muslims cannot have non-Muslim friends.
No, I didn't say that. No. What I said is that intimacy, friendship in Islam has two different meanings. One type of friendship is the friendship where we take people into our religious, intimate friendship, and therefore they have the chance to even impact upon our morals.
Could you point out the difference between being intimate and interact with?
Yes,
I mean, like if I have non-Muslim co-workers, am I allowed to do so?
Of course. I mean, I have non-Muslim colleagues, co-workers, neighbors, and they're my friends. At the same token, they don't influence me religiously. They don't influence my perception of God. They don't influence my moral decisions. But they are necessarily the people that I interact with every single day. So they are friends, but of a different nature.
I would like to step back from the media and turn to Dutch politics.
Yes.
Because there is a negative attitude towards you from Dutch Parliament and a certain part of Dutch society. How do you explain that?
Well, Abdullah, the person, because I don't want to use a paintbrush to speak about the Dutch Parliament. I didn't hear many people in the Dutch Parliament speaking negatively about me or Islam. I heard one particular person, and I think his voice is probably clearer and more blatant than all others, is that Mr. Geert Wilders, if I'm pronouncing his name correctly. He's a public servant who has some very blatant bias, prejudice against Islam and Muslims. Now, probably in a public interview or a public forum, we could probably get into his head and find out why. But that's the voice I heard. Now, I think Mr. Wilders has to speak for himself because he doesn't know me. He doesn't know my background. And he certainly doesn't know anything about the Quran or about Islamic civilization. But nevertheless, he's a person that's holding public trust.
But do you call him ignorant?
No, I wouldn't call him ignorant. I'd say that Mr. Wilders is a protagonist. I say that Mr. Wilders is manipulating and exploiting public fear. I say that Mr. Wilders is seeking to cement himself in his position by fanning this kind of dissent among the Dutch public.
So, asking the Minister of Justice, Heer Balin, to block you from entering Holland is not about you in person, but about his fear for Islam. Is that correct?
Not his fear for Islam. Is to prevent anyone that he thinks may be able to speak intelligently about Islam so as to cast a totally different view about Islam and Muslims to the Dutch public. He wants to dominate the view that people have about Islam and Muslims. So he wants to prevent any other kind of view that would come forward intelligently. If I were a Dutch citizen and Muslim, I would, or for that matter, a God-fearing person, I would be very concerned about Mr. Wilders and his party in particular.